can go ahead. Okay. Welcome everybody to session 2. My apologies that we are starting a little bit later. I'll keep my intro short so that we can start with the speakers, which, let's face it, are the people that you came here to listen to anyway. So let us introduce them. Unfortunately, Tomiso, who is set to go third, is not able to join us live. However, hopefully we will still be able to play her video. But first up, we will have Dr. Madison Lee, and then we will have Dr. Lubna Abbas. Madison will be talking all about heritage in the Ottoman Empire, and Lubna will be talking about media as a tool for globalization. And that is, of course, the theme of this session 2, cultural heritage and globalization. So without further ado, I will ask Madison to start sharing her presentation and take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. My video is a little laggy from the others, so I think I will stop my video while I'm screen sharing because maybe I don't have the strongest internet. I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay. If there are any problems, please speak up. Yeah, and so I will start now. I will just turn my camera off. Okay, so thank you everyone, and thank you for the introduction. My name is Madison, or Maddie, it's also fine. I'm Canadian and I am a cultural historian of the modern Middle East, focusing on Iraq. And today I'm going to be speaking about heritage consciousness in the Ottoman capital and periphery, focusing on the early modern period, which is the 16th to 18th century, but I'm also going to give a few examples from before that to provide some historical context to the issues that I'm talking about. So, in 1868, the Ottoman governor of Aydin, Hakim Pasha Ismail Pasha, wrote a letter to the Council of State where he highlighted an issue that was facing the Ottoman Empire at the time. Namely, that European and American diplomats and archaeologists were coming into the Ottoman Empire and removing antiquities to fill the great museums of Europe. And he advocated for some sort of action to prevent this from happening. You can read this if you want. I just want to highlight a couple parts of his letter. He says, "It is known and clear to all that there are more antiquities held in the Ottoman domains than other lands." And he says if this is allowed to continue any longer, it's evident that all of these places will soon be robbed of all of their treasures. And we, the Ottoman Empire, won't be able to benefit from this Ottoman heritage. And so so this is in 1868. The following year, 1869, is when we see the first bylaw in the Ottoman Empire preventing the illicit export of antiquities. And then about 2 decades later, this man, Osman Hamdi Bey, founded the Imperial Archaeology Museum in Constantinople, which is now the Istanbul Archaeology Museums. And I want to highlight these two things, laws and museums, because they emerged in the Ottoman Empire a little bit later than similar laws and museums in Western Europe and America. And this has been used to justify a narrative of what's called Ottoman indifference. And this is the assumption that the Ottoman Empire didn't really care so much about antiquities and heritage. And this justified Europeans and Americans coming in to sort of rescue these antiquities from Ottoman neglect. But this assumption is really driven by European notions of what heritage management is. And so essentially laws and museums. And these assumptions are even still used today to justify European museums' retention of Middle Eastern antiquities. They say if we hadn't taken these things 100, 200 years ago, they would have been lost to history. So what I'm going to present today is a few case studies from the Middle East that highlight heritage consciousness. So the valuing of heritage using different evidence. So not just within the European standards of what heritage management is, but different case studies. And I hope you find them interesting and convincing. So the first is spolia, which you might be familiar with. It's the use of repurposed stone in building or monument construction. And in the 1620s, the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, Thomas Roe, attempted to remove a number of reliefs from the Golden Gate in Constantinople, which had been constructed of Byzantine spolia. And this practice, the idea to use Byzantine spolia to create new structures, was a little disturbing to Western Europeans who viewed it disrespectfully, like they viewed it as disrespectful to the Byzantine Empire, of which they had sort of appointed themselves heirs, also of classical Greece and Rome. And so Thomas Roe wanted to remove these sculptures, but he faced opposition at sort of every level of society. He was unable to find local workmen to do the work for him. He was unable to have an imam or church leader, like two different people. He wasn't unable to find any religious leader who would condemn the sculptures because they were worried if they were removed, a curse would fall upon Constantinople. And he tried bribing the Ottoman treasurer to give them extra support for the work. And this, of course, was unsuccessful. And so although the construction of the gate itself was seen for Europeans as evidence of Ottoman indifference, wow, they don't care about heritage, in reality, the reactions to this project, Thomas Roe's attempted removal of these stones, shows that people at every strata of society really felt aligned with the values of this monument, which of course had changed. By including Byzantine spolia, it became a testament to the 1453 conquest of Constantinople, or fall of Constantinople, depending where you are. And so, yeah, and so this shows a different way of heritage management that wasn't aligned with what Europeans viewed as modern practice. The second example is of religious relics. And so for this, we're actually going to go even further back in time, just to highlight how old this tradition is. Religious relics are thought to be associated with historical religious figures. And they're collected, preserved, and displayed by the Ottoman state in Topkapı Palace in Constantinople to affirm the Sultan's position as the leader of the Islamic world. Yes, and they were also collected by individual mosques and churches as well, and by individuals themselves. For example, the 12th century pilgrim, Ali ibn Abi Bakr al-Harawi, who encountered relics and antiquities during his travels through Iraq. He purchased a stone allegedly containing the footprint of Prophet Muhammad. And when he visited the site of Samarra, he wrote that it contains antiquities that indicate its importance. And so clearly, I'm sorry, I just got a notification that participants can now see my screen. Is everything okay? You can still hear and see?
Don't worry, we've been able to see it the whole time.
Oh, whew, okay, cool. Yeah, and so the relics and the fact that antiquities give the site of Samara part of its historical value, clearly outside of European standards, indicates a strong heritage consciousness that existed even before the Ottoman Empire at this time, in the 12th century. And the final example is poetry. So specifically Arab poetry, Arabic ruin poetry, in which the romanticization of ruins has been a common trope since at least the 6th century. Paul Cooper writes that landscape and memory become one in Arabic ruin poetry. The ruin becomes a repository for memories that can be accessed by spending a moment of stillness there. Of course, in some very hostile environments, ruins, for example, like Roman ruins, are really the only thing that endures for a long time. And so Arabic ruin poetry often features the writer taking a moment in ruins to contemplate the past, to contemplate great civilizations and loss, and to think about their own mortality. I have an example here from the 6th century. The ruins Khawla left on the mottled rock plains of Tamad appear and fade like the trace of a tattoo on the back of a hand. There my friend halted, tow camels over me, saying, "Don't lose yourself in grief, man, endure." And so here the ruins are seen, they're compared to a lover and thought of very respectfully, of course, and of course, symbolic of endurance. And so these three examples, spolia, relics, and poetry, indicate something that is, of course, kind of obvious, that people in the early modern Middle East did care for heritage before museums became commonplace and before legislation was implemented to control the trade of antiquities. The narrative that modern Ottoman heritage management began in the late 19th century often neglects evidence of heritage management that didn't align with European standards. What has actually been called heritage governance or cultural governance. And assumptions of Ottoman indifference have been used to perpetuate power imbalances up to the present day, specifically between archaeologically rich countries in the Middle East and the European countries who have appointed themselves guardians of Middle Eastern antiquities. So I hope you found this interesting and convincing. Thank you so much to the organizers, the other speakers, and the attendees and participants. If you would like to reach out with any questions or comments, my email is on the screen. I'm really looking forward to the other presentations and the Q&A. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Madison. Very interesting talk. Excellent start to this session too. I realized, by the way, with all the stress of starting late, I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Matilda Siebrecht, and I will be the moderator of this session. But for now, let us listen to our second speaker. Now, unfortunately, we have had some technical issues, so we are not able to share these PowerPoint slides. However, we do have a lovely video from Lubna, and she will also be here for the question and answer to answer any questions that you have. So do stick around for that. In the meantime, I will share the video. Sound is shared. Good. Okay. Oops. Okay, so enjoy this lovely talk from Lubna Abbas, our second speaker.
Hello everyone, my name is Lubna. I'm a sociologist, and the topic I'm going to present for this event is Media, a Tool of Globalization and its Impacts on Culture. Let's begin with introduction. The study is being conducted to understand the role of digital media as a facilitator of globalization in order to influence culture of various societies. It broadcasts products for consumer as well as it influences their views, ideas, and thoughts. Each segment of society like family, religion, politics, and economy are inevitably affected by it. Now, let me introduce you with the term globalization. Generally, globalization is explained as global construction, global expansion, or internationalization. But there is also a pessimistic view found, according to which it is global contraction, Americanization, or westernization. According to some critics, globalization has created the world of winners and losers, which is only facilitating wealthy countries in their political and economic conquest. They are promoting their goals as global goals. Global village is actually global plundering for developing nations. According to some critics, media is creating identity crisis and media imperialism. Culture imperialism through media is defined as media imperialism. Global communication has been used to invade, destabilize, and control other cultures. It has been done intentionally to gain economic benefits. Similarly, the definition of right, wrong, life, society, individualism has been corrupted by global expansion. Local culture and language are about to extend due to its expansion. Globalization does not function in isolation. It has always been backed by digital media. This has been proved through various theories. From modernization to development theories, we have seen how digital media has been used by developed countries to bring desired changes in developing countries. Modernization and development theories were emerged in the scenario of Cold War. These were used to transform traditional societies into modern societies. These were antitheses of Marxism and were used to promote capitalism. Development was shaped in a way that it benefits developed countries more while keeping developing countries in a state of dependency. The word international has been used to promote Western economic and political model. Digital media in Pakistan are found in numerous forms. People in Pakistan are using different social media platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Besides, youngsters are also fond of watching Netflix. Similarly, many English channels like CNN, BBC, HBO, Nickelodeon are also being watched. This is not only the case, many private channels of Pakistan like ARY, Hum, and many other are also inspired by global presentation and depiction of global culture. As digital media has been proved to one of the most influential elements to change the mind and ways of people, it has been used to spread the essence of globalization among masses. While discussing family, we have seen a transition from traditional to modern and joined to nuclear family system. This has been endorsed by media like drama, music, and film. We have seen a plus in the form of women empowerment. Besides, we have seen Western clothes and food becoming the part of Pakistani household. This transition brings benefit on one hand, while on other hand we are losing core traditional values. Besides, we are also facing problems like high divorce rate, which is problematic for our culture. Similar to West, trends like questioning religion and religious clerics are also being endorsed through digital media. Trends like treating religion as personal matter is also found, which is not the part of our culture. Moreover, we have seen lots of international ads on TV like KFC, McDonald's, L'Oreal, and Pepsi, which provide us extensive variety and quality, but it also affects our local business. Moreover, media presentation in the form of dramas and show are promoting the culture of materialism, show off, and buying unnecessary things, which are not truly the values of our culture. Lastly, due to the global presentation, the culture of free speech is developed, which is a positive move. Public participation and public mobilization is a fruitful game. Now people are more aware of their rights, but it has also created an atmosphere of intolerance, which is not a good thing. Conclusion, it is an unavoidable fact that digital media is playing a role of a tool of globalization to impact culture in an unnoticeable way. One cannot avoid its influence, but its negative impacts can be lessened by scrutinizing content on digital media. Moreover, words need to pay attention towards the distribution of its essence that need to be balanced between developed and developing countries. That said, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lubna. And as I mentioned, Lubna is here live in the chat. So if you have any questions, keep them in mind and we will have them in the question and answer session. However, as we are doing well for time, if the organizers do not disagree, I'm waiting for them to message me, then we might play the video from Tumiso, our final speaker, if I can get it up on my screen. Perfect, yes, approval is given. Okay. She says confidently, hopefully it's up on her screen. Yes, it is, good. Okay. One moment, just loading. Okay. Sharing now.
Is going to be cultural heritage and preservation. So if we have not met before, my name is Tumisho Dolamo. I am a South African anthropologist currently based in South Africa. And I am working currently as a research associate for a biomedical health and wellness company. My journey with anthropology started in 2017 when I did my undergrad degree in anthropology as well as political sciences at the University of Witwatersrand, and currently I'm on my journey to completing my Masters of Arts in anthropology. So, as I mentioned before, I will be a presenter for this part of the session. Cultural heritage preservation in post-pandemic times in Southern Africa. This will be our case study and our topic for the day. Before we begin, I think it's important to gain a little bit more knowledge and context on as to the research, why I went for this topic and why I'll be presenting this to you today. So in March 2020, South Africa underwent a national lockdown in which there were restrictions that were implemented due to COVID-19. The results of the lockdown and the pandemic was a decline in the economy, and this affected multiple areas. And one of the areas in which it affected was the South African Department of Arts, Sports and Culture. The department reacted to the lockdown by implementing measures that were said to be there to assist the athletes and artists during the pandemic. And these measures, as reported by the South African government, were said to include funding as well as support. However, they were not received as effectively and efficiently by many. A result of the lack of efficiency was seen at one of the country's landmarks, which is a museum that is located in Gauteng, and this is amongst other galleries and museums that had to close their doors and retrench their staff members. The research is going to be qualitative in nature and will have an interest in the narratives around cultural heritage in South Africa, and this will be acquired through literature. It's going to be qualitative in nature because in anthropology, that is the type of research methodology that we use. And as I mentioned, it will be mainly literature and media-based analysis. The pandemic caused a lot of changes in various, if not all, aspects of our lives. And I think we can all agree that economies all over the world experienced some sort of effect by this. In South Africa, the cultural department faced various issues in which led to the closing of the heritage attractions as well as art galleries. We're going to discuss this and analyze this a little bit further as we keep going in the presentation. The closing of these heritage attractions and art galleries raises a concern for the country and its cultural legacy. And some of the main questions include, what is the future for the country's cultural heritage, and how will it be told and presented? Another question is, if there's no space in the country for the cultural heritage and artifacts, then what is going to happen to them? And how will what is currently going on in these institutions affect how our cultural exhibitions are perceived and accepted globally? So the purpose behind the study was to obviously analyze the effect the COVID-19 pandemic had on the South African culture and heritage institutions. It was also to discuss the future of the country's culture and heritage institutions and their methods and processes. Another focal point and purpose of the study was to get a narrative from someone within the country's arts, culture, and heritage industry within this within the current situation. So in order for us to get into the research, I think it's important to get a little background on South Africa for those of us that may not know it that well. South Africa is a country in the sub-Saharan Africa. It is known as the Republic of South Africa. It is gained independence from the United Kingdom. It was colonized by the UK. The currency that they use is South African rands, which is abbreviated as ZAR. It went through a period of apartheid that ended in 1994, which is quite recent, hence why the cultural and heritage institutions and sites are so important, and why the preservation of them is also something that needs to be looked at. It's got over 60 million people as a population, and it's got 3 capital cities. It also has 11 official languages. So just like the rest of the world, the country was hit with the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, and the national lockdown began in March 2020 and was proposed to last a period of 21 days. However, this was not the case. The restrictions that were implemented in various levels from level 1 to level 4, and the arts, culture, and sports department was not an essential service, and therefore there was not a lot of people in this department going to work. The end of the lockdown, as I said, did not last 21 days. It went on till April 2022. So this was definitely a lot longer than a lot of us had expected. It was an entire 2-year lockdown, and so you can imagine that there was a decline in the economy, and it affected various departments such as the Department of Arts, Sports, and Culture. The various departments in South Africa that overlook the running of the various sectors, and one of these departments is the Department of Arts, Sports, and Culture, which is going to be one of our main focal points for this presentation. The current minister in this department is Mr. Natim Tetwa, and their vision is a creative and inclusion nation. Their mission is to develop, preserve, and protect and promote arts, culture, and heritage, and it's also contributing to various legislative matters. They do have a value statement, and they're committed to core values based on the principle of Batopele, which means people first. So they believe in putting people first, and they believe in patriotism, Ubuntu, which is togetherness, as well as creative and innovation. There are other morals and values that they believe in, as mentioned in the following slide. And it's important to note that this department has 15 heritage institutions under its running. The 15 heritage institutions include those ones that are listed above. And the most important one that we're going to look at today is not on this list, as it is independently owned, but it is called the Lilies Leaf Museum. So the effect of COVID-19's lockdown on those that work under this department included the announcement of reparations in the form of funding and support being announced by Minister Natim Tetwa and his department. So what was included in this is that it was a 150 million relief fund that would be available to those artists and athletes that needed it. because of the fact that there was no activities in the sector and there was endangering of the heritage sites and closing down of these sites indefinitely. So one of the heritage sites, as I mentioned, that was closed down indefinitely was Lilies Leaf, which is based in Rivonia, Johannesburg. Lilies Leaf contributed to the liberation of the country. It is famous for housing various ANC freedom fighters during the apartheid era, which I mentioned ended in 1994. And it's one of South Africa's national heritage sites. It's also home to the exhibitions that tell the story of democracy of the country. And it is mentioned that they had 8.1 million rands that went unaccounted for, that was given as a part of a 1 million rand agreement that was to be used to upgrade the site. Therefore, they were in the midst of a funding crisis that was furthermore accelerated by lockdown, and the government and Lilies Leaf could not find an agreement, and there was no support, according to Lilies Leaf, that the government could provide further. And therefore, in early 2021, the site was unable to pay salaries. And in May 2021, they made a call to the department to assist with relief, and there was no success, and therefore the site was closed down indefinitely. At the moment, I can confirm that the site is still closed down. And this highlights the issue of the country not prioritizing heritage sites, both government officials as well as individuals, and culture, thus leading to further engagement of these sites and resources. Because when you don't prioritize these things, then they will diminish and their importance will diminish as well. So heritage sites and culture need to be prioritized by the government in order for it to be prioritized by citizens, and for preservation of sites and artifacts to take place locally as well as internationally. Poorly preserved artifacts will therefore not be considered internationally, and then they just go into not being displayed and not being talked about, and then you lose a part of history. Heritage being characterized as endangered shows a negative connotation, shows that there's a short lifespan of heritage, and there will be decreased attraction, which results in lack of resources to maintain. And it also highlights a lack of interest as well as prioritization of these sites and resources, thus being a structural problem amongst the government and how it is run. Patriotism also takes a knock when such sites and institutions go through such periods, and it makes it hard for people within the country to support further, and then these things do go lost in the history. So that is my presentation on the preservation of cultural heritage in South Africa as a case study. And thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for attending the session. And I'm open to taking any questions via email or under this chat, and you can definitely discuss this further. But as you can see that the lockdown has affected various areas and has made issues such as preserving heritage something that is now of importance, because these institutions become endangered and become lost, and now the narratives aren't told by who they're supposed to be or held by their rightful owners. Thank you again.
Okay, so that was our lovely third speaker, who, as I say, unfortunately cannot be here, but as she said, she seems happy to receive any messages, so feel free to reach out to her. Her contact details should be in the catalogue, I believe. So I see that Madison and Lubna are both here, and video's on, ready to interact. If anybody has any questions for either of our speakers, please do pop up your hand and you can ask them live. Alternatively, you can also write anything in the chat and we will relay your question to them. But I have some to start us off, just while people get their brains going. So Madison, you spoke about this a little bit, but perhaps you could expand a bit more on the point. So we know how the sort of past perceptions of what was considered valuable in history and how people express that value has changed past populations, but how do you think that has affected, for example, the modern perception of history within that region by existing modern populations?
Well, there actually is a really interesting article from a couple of years ago. It's called Decolonizing Babylon. And it's written pretty much to answer this specific question, because a lot of heritage management and scholarship on the Middle East has been conducted by European and American institutions. And they tend to see the Middle East as either some biblical land, like their knowledge of it is based in the Bible and classics, the study of classics, or it's some sort of exotic nightmare world full of dangers. These are the two perceptions of the Middle East that existed really until like the late 19th century, even up until like the interwar period. And so this article, Decolonizing Babylon, focuses on the thing that they always neglect, which is the people who live there and the ways, because Babylon is a site now, like it's a city where people live, you know, and they see the walls of Babylon every day and they have different associations with it. And so I don't want to like overgeneralize what these associations are. But yeah, I find that most scholarship really operates from a European or Western perspective, even without realizing it. Like, even when it's criticizing the European narrative, it's still operating within the framework and using ideas like Ottoman indifference kind of uncritically. Yeah.
Sorry, just a meeting. And would you say, in kind of addition to that, then that narrative has also then been a bit more perpetuated through things like the tourist industry, for example? I mean, people who are living there think, okay, well, I guess this is what people want, so let's give it to them. Or do you see that perception is also different from people who are still living there?
I think that there are definitely, like, there's definitely knowledge that like, oh, this industry exists regardless how I feel about it. And so like, for example, I went to Babylon in March this year, and there's definitely like many souvenir stalls, people selling like imitation seals and things. And people were very excited to like just offer up information about history to me. There is occasionally something they say that I think is based more on myth or like local rumor rather than fact. And this is, you know, another part of the problem, that scholarship on the Middle East often isn't shared with the people who could use it the most. Yeah, so it's interesting. And I think the more we learn about it, the better.
As with everything, I guess, suppose. Lubna, sorry, don't worry, I haven't forgotten you. I also have a question to start us off. I don't know if anyone else has any yet. They're probably just processing. But so I have to admit, from your talk, it seemed like you might think there's more disadvantages than advantages to globalization. You listed a lot of lovely advantages, but I was wondering what your thoughts were on that in general. Also from Madison's talk, I mean, that's a little bit of the kind of message, I suppose, that we might be showing, that yes, it's a wonderful thing, but there are lots of dangers as well. Would you say the balance is a little more in that direction?
So when I saw this topic, it really, inspired me, and this topic suddenly emerged in my mind. So I started on this, and I saw a lot of work from developing country on this topic specifically, which I have done. So like different terms was used, statement was different, but things was related. As you are saying that I have missed so many things like advantages, you mean to say, but thing is that everybody is talking about advantages. you see a lot of things related to advantages and benefits, but there are certain things which are unnoticed, which need to be discussed, and this is the side which is being ignored. So I just try to work on it, and I try to relate it with my society, how we are. I belong from a developing nation, so I can feel it. It is like close to my heart, and I can feel it more than a person who observe things from outside world. So that's why I work on it, and I mention more disadvantages and than advantages. So that's my point.
No, I mean, definitely fair enough. I was just curious indeed to hear more your personal.
Yeah.
And in terms of the kind of, you mentioned that we need to sort of be more scrutinize what messages are being relayed in that respect as well. And obviously now it's mainly being done by media and sort of popular advertisements, as you mentioned. How would you suggest we circumnavigate that? Who should be the people in charge of deciding, or is it too complex to consider?
Okay, so in every country there is a media like system, or you can say which are responsible for scrutinizing things. Like in our country there's PEMBRA, so they used to scrutinize things which are not related to our culture, or which are against, or you can say which are troublesome or problematic. So they need to look at these things. There are a lot of I'm not saying that all is negative. I'm also very much you can say fond of globalization, obviously, but as I said, that everybody talk about usefulness or advantages and benefits, but then there is need to talk about the things which are being ignored, like things that we have to discuss, that there are also disadvantages. Everything comes with advantages and disadvantages, but here on the on the big screen we only see advantages, and that's all. We are being ignored. We are not looking at these facts, that these things are also here, and we have to look into these things. So PEMBRA is responsible, you can say. If in my country, if you say that what kind of bodies are there, so there are certain media bodies which are regulating such kind of things, so they need to scrutinize such kind of content which are being played on TV, or you can say social media in the recorded form or other forms. So that need to be much more careful regarding these things. I have seen there are a lot of like Pakistani channels which are playing certain things, or which are not matched to our culture, or these things are also being criticized on social media as well, like why they're playing such kind of things on channel. So these bodies need to be worry about these things, or they need to be concerned about such kind of things before playing such content on television. So that's my point actually related to it.
And would you say then that indeed it needs to come from kind of the top down, it needs to start with the big corporations, or can it start also from, for example, the family level? Like the parents should think, okay, what message do we want?
So we have a different kind of family system from West. So we are very traditional, we are not so modern, we have different values, and these things are overlooked. Things which are being presented nowadays on our media, I'm not saying the Western, like we are also, as I have mentioned, that we used to watch a lot of things like Netflix and other stuff, but we know the difference between our culture and the other cultures. So these things are like our culture is what I feel like is you can say override, or you can say is sometimes oppressed, in the sense like our private channels are playing such stuff, ignoring our culture, and playing such things like the ideas of, you can say, globalization more than our culture. They're promoting such thing more than the things they need to promote. So I am I'm, you can say, very much concerned or worried about such kind of thing, that we are forgetting our core values. We are blindly adopting things, but we are not worried. We should be proud of our culture, we should be proud of our core values. So such kind of stuffs need to be taken, and these things need to be keep in mind while playing such content on television.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I mean, Madison, your two talks just complemented each other perfect, really, because we had sort of from the very academic side of things, but also then from the more kind of community side of things. So that was really nice to have that combination. And you sort of mentioned how, things have changed and perhaps then perceptions are not as they could have been because of how things were dealt with in the past. What do you believe should be done for kind of the future to try and lessen the issues, shall we say, that were caused by the past approach to history in the Ottoman Empire? Big question, I know.
Yeah. So there's, I think probably Lubna is also interested in like the decolonization of scholarship and heritage management practice. And there are a few different like ways that we can do that and try to improve heritage management and history research in the future. One is to like challenge the structures, sort of the neo-colonial structures that dictate how we do research and what terms like modern mean. There's also to encourage research not in English, because English language research, of course, English is sort of the lingua franca of the world, but Lubna, I think, highlighted that this sort of represents like a linguistic imperialism. Like there's a reason that English is the lingua franca, and it really excludes researchers and heritage managers that don't know English. And then again, it prevents people at the local level, like the people actually doing heritage management, it prevents them from being able to access this information. So encouraging research like in Arabic or other local languages. Similarly, supporting researchers in these regions, because of course I'm Canadian, and so there's only so much that I can understand and empathize. A lot of the things I'm saying would have like, they would be more meaningful said by a local researcher who has lived experience with this. Yeah, and so that's a few. Also conducting research on like informal sources of history. So not just administrative documents of governments, but also like poetry and newspapers, photographs. Basing our research on these sorts of things can really highlight local experience instead of like the imperial perspective. Yeah, maybe Lubna has more to expand, but this is what came to my mind.
No, thank you. Yes, indeed. Lubna, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Could you please repeat it, because I lost connection in between?
Oh no, it was quite a detailed answer, I must admit. I'll try to summarize. In terms of sort of decolonizing the actual practice of scholarship, I suppose, is a very simplified form. Sorry, Maddie. But she was much more verbose than I am being right now. But yes, in terms of the fact that, for example, well, I can give an example of myself as well. I'm a Scottish woman who's currently working in the Canadian Arctic on Paleo Inuits culture, simply because the regulations that are in place for who is able to actually do research into cultural heritage in those regions mean that it's very restricted to those who have access to university education and access to then universities which are not up in the Arctic, for example. So yes, Madison was just saying how that could be a way forward of how to try to avoid these issues happening again, or try to kind of mitigate the issues that have happened so far in terms of decolonizing practices in scholarship itself. So I was wondering if you had any views on that. I'm really sorry, I still didn't get it because there is a cut. There's a cut on your side, so I didn't understand. You are talking about like decolonization related to research, is that so? Exactly, yes. Okay, so
Okay, so I got this point that you're saying that people need to do research from the areas, like they need to come up and they have to present the researches related to areas instead of playing like the outsiders. Is that so? I still didn't get actually.
That's sort of a more negative view. I guess what we were showing before. Maybe Madison, would you like to try in a short, simple form that hopefully we'll get through?
Maybe there's a problem with the audio, so I just typed it in the chat.
Yes, I see that Madison
would be
is
nice. Exactly.
Yeah, it's in there now, so hopefully with your delay it should come through to you in a second.
Okay, so it's like, how do you think we decolonize scholarship? So there are like I have kind of like different kind of point of view related to it, and there might be you are having different kind of idea related to it. So I think we need to you know, try to, if you are talking about academic, that we need to work related to our culture more. We need to promote our culture and show world what is actually what is inside our culture, and what are you can say elements and things. Or you can say that we need to study things from our point of view. We need to see things from our from the lens of insider instead of using the outsider lens. So if there is need to that is I think that is the way we can work related to it, and we can bring improvement in this field. Besides, you can also present it through comparison, like this is the one side, one side you can say perspective, and this is the other side perspective. So that also can help in understanding both sides. So you can simply just tell your perspective, or you can just compare it. So people will learn it more in this way, I think, in better way.
That sounds like an excellent plan. I think we should submit a proposal to governments everywhere. I see that there is a message for Madison in the chat, and perhaps Lubna, you might be able to read it as well and think about your own answer too. How can we bring the Indigenous knowledge system of a culture into the core academia of cultural heritage? So Madison, perhaps you would like to go first.
Yes, for sure. It's an interesting question, but I would suggest, instead of bringing Indigenous knowledge or local knowledge into academia, we expand academia to include many more things, many more approaches. How do I say it? Like, I think we as academics and heritage managers and historians need to reassess what we view as like the right way to do something. For example, when archaeology was becoming standardized, there's this like, according to what standards, or we see the professionalization of archaeology. Who are the professionals? I think that the problem is just that we are like, again, there are certain Western assumptions for what academia includes. And I actually don't know if I see that changing anytime soon. There's also like the issue of paywalls. Speaking of decolonizing scholarship, paywalls alienate people and exclude them. That's sort of like, I don't know, a really broad, sort of vague answer to your question. Like, more specific ways, how can we bring local knowledge into core academia, is to have like workshops and classes taught by local people. Locals are like they often work as tour guides who live near archaeological sites. They work as tour guides and they share a lot of their own experience. With like the magic of technology, we could absolutely share their stories to people who are not just physically there, which we should be doing. We can promote, like, for example, there's this awesome resource, the Middle East and North Africa newspapers collection. It's available online. You can just look it up now if you want. And it's an archived repository of hundreds of thousands of 20th century newspapers from the Middle East. And so you can read about like the Suez crisis, what people were saying about it on the day. And there are a lot of really interesting local stories about things that people did that wouldn't have made it into scholarship because they didn't happen like at the government level. Yeah, I feel like that answer was kind of all over the place. But there's, I don't know, as we decolonize scholarship, hopefully we can like open our eyes to the fact that what is professional and what is modern isn't like a fixed notion. It's shaped by these sort of colonial biases.
No, I think that was indeed a good answer. And it shows indeed that it is a complex topic and it's something that doesn't have just one answer. I guess it depends on the culture as well, where you are in the world, how colonization has affected those different cultures in different ways. Because obviously it's mainly negative, of course, but to different extents in different places. And there's been different levels of independence brought back after that. Lubna, would you like to add anything to that? Hopefully you got it. Oh, you're still muted.
Can you hear it? Can you hear me?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, so we can expand the core academic system to bring, indigenous knowledge into it. Social media is accessible to all, so it can be included into it by different ways. So I think that's from my side.
I like it. Short, punchy. Yes, no, I think, and indeed, I think that that's been a really nice message from this whole session, is that there's not just one way to do something. We can think outside the box and try to view these things in a different way. I see that there's no more questions. If anybody else from the audience has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat, raise your hand. Raise your hand on Zoom. If you raise it in person, I won't see it. Yeah, I'll give you another minute or so, but I don't see anyone. I a little bit early. If that is acceptable to the organizers as well, I will also wait for confirmation on that. Unless either of you, Madison or Lubna, have any further parting words of wisdom that you would like to share.
I just want to thank you for moderating the session. Beautifully done.
Thank you.
And good luck with your research in the Arctic.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for providing me opportunity to be part of this amazing, event and platform.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you both to our speakers. I think they raise excellent points, and hopefully people who have attended think a little differently indeed about the pros and cons of globalization. Hopefully we can make it more pro in the future by changing our approach to things. So we will have a break now. However, the room will remain open if anyone spontaneously now has a discussion point that they want to discuss. Otherwise, we will be meeting back again, just checking my timetable, at 4:10 conference time, so UTC +1. So that's in 1 hour and 25 minutes. So a nice long break to go and refresh yourself, think about how we can change the world, make it a better place. And yeah, I will actually be back again moderating session 3. So I will see you all there.
Thank you. See you all.